Hello, folks. Thanks for coming. Seems like a half full room, but that's okay. I'll work with this. Um, I just want to do a really quick roundup before I go deeper, just to understand where you guys are from. So, who's from Poland? Hands up. Okay, clear majority. Who's from Scandinavia? Go Scandinavia! Okay, and who's from UK? Oh, cool. Somehow I knew there was one or two UK people in here. Awesome. And the rest of Europe, hands up. Awesome. Um, so let's dive in. I'm from Finland. My name is Miikka Luotio. I'm actually based in Finland, from Finland. I was born there. I've lived out of Finland for a few years, but I always come back. Back and forth Germany and Finland mostly. I've started in 2007 with mobile games. Started working on mobile games when there was this mostly J2MA based Java mobile games. The business was completely different back then in 2007. It was more about selling games to web operators, and it was more like a shotgun approach rather than quality. No IAPs, it was all premium, right? So completely different market, and the hardware was completely different also. This device, SL55, I freaking hate that phone. Never showed that to me. That was the hardest phone to port to. And at DChock, where I started, we had to port to, I think, at some point over 200 devices, and that was the pain in the ass for everybody in the company. But so I just wanted to always put like comparison that we've come a long way, and I'm still doing mobile games today, and never really left that side of business. And here to share some insights from the journey, how I got from 2007 to 2018, and how today you want to evaluate and evaluate for success on mobile free-to-play games specifically. So I work at a company called Tilting Point, and Tilting Point used to be, back in 2013, it started as a mobile publisher, publishing for mobile premium games, and then quickly pivoted to free-to-play, because that was the rising trend at that point. And ever since, we published around 16 different mobile free-to-play games. And last year was a really interesting lesson for the whole company. We realized that, okay, there's this, the publishing model, the traditional publishing model, which is 50-50 profit share. Let's make magic happen and pray that it works. We did that probably 3-4 times, and it didn't work. So last year we realized that model isn't really scalable as it is, because the risks are really high, and the chances that your game will succeed is really high. And then even if your game ends up being profitable, the developer gets paid like 6 months. The first payment they get is 6 months after they launch the game, which doesn't really make sense for the developer and for us, because for publishers and people in this business, you want to have long-term relationships, not something that just lasts for a couple months. So we've kind of last year we took one of the core strengths of the team, which was marketing and user acquisition, which was the key strength at Tilting Point, and we took that and started to shift our whole business last year to doing only these UA investment and management deals, which you could call like core publishing, really, because it's publishing, but it's just a core part of it, and it's not a revenue share model. So we decided that, okay, let's do what we do instead of taking the lion's share of the game and try to force that publishing model to work. So we're at the point where I would say there is no contender exactly on the exact precise model, at least yet. I'm pretty sure there will be more. But if you look at the market right now, we can offer basically all the publishing functions added into the marketing side. So kind of in a unique position, and talk about that later, but I'm not going to bore you to that. Let's go to the meat of the presentation here. So just to give you an idea, I wanted to talk about a little bit, where do publishers, investors, and the likes find games, right? And this is aimed at developers mostly, this presentation. If there's some publishers here, you will also find some interesting tidbits, I'm sure. But this is from a kind of like a investor, co-developer, publisher point of view, where we actually found our best games in 2017. So, one of the things that kind of was a sobering lesson for me personally was that no matter how many conferences you go to, it still doesn't beat the fact that if you know that guy you trust, and they know this really cool game that's doing great in soft launch, and you should take a look, and they call you, and you know them. The most strongest games we actually got in our portfolio, in all the models, publishing, co-development, and UA, we got through referrals, which is really powerful. So if you're a developer today, going to conferences, as much as you want to show your game, it's as important that you actually go out and meet people and talk to them and make contacts and network. That's really important, because that way somebody sees your game, even if that publisher is not interested in the game, they will talk to another publisher, or they know somebody who's looking for those type of games. So it's very important for you to do that, and I would advise to focus on that, because that's where we got most of our games last year. So talking about a little bit how we look at publishing, this model is basically dying. It is shifting towards more like a co-development model right now. But initially, if there's a new game that's been pitched to us, we get about, and this is like on a quarterly basis, we get about 80 pitches that qualify what we're looking for. And then we play those games. We play about 70 of them out of the 80 that actually make sense. Okay, this actually runs, the game runs, it's not complete trash. And then out of those first impressions, we usually do an initial evaluation where our whole team plays about 60 games a quarter. And a full evaluation is where there's, analysis on the market, analysis on the game. We do like a design analysis and go really deep. And from 80, only 15 games kind of make that far, usually in a quarter. And this is like roughly a median average of all quarters last year. And only 2 of 80 games end up in the contract. And this is kind of like the publishing model, right? And this is also part of the reasons why it's so hard to operate a profitable publishing business with this model, because you're basically looking for a needle in a haystack. And out of these 2 games, one of them gets signed, probably. And if you do this, let's say, a couple times a year, it's a 50-50 chance that it's going to be a profitable game. But as I was talking about the kind of shift in our company towards this user acquisition and marketing model, one thing we realized is that there's this big need for people who understand games, people who actually play games and market them. So we kind of found our little niche there, because our games are, our guys are all from the game side, and they actually play the games and they understand it, they understand the data. So we developed a process where we can basically evaluate if your game is live globally or actually in soft launch as well. How do we measure that it can scale? So there's basically 5 steps that we do. So on step number 1, we do the NDAs, all that. But the important part is to actually do a data due diligence. So what we're looking there is we're looking at retention, monetization, important, what's your ARPDAU, what's your day 7, what's your day 30. Also understanding if you've done previous user acquisition campaigns and kind of looking at them in detail. So then on a step 2, we do a free $500 test for those games that kind of pass that. We see that, okay, the metrics look pretty good. Let's give it a $500 test for about 7 to 10 days. We usually do that in Canada because if you do it anywhere else in Canada, other than Canada, we found that that is the closest market example that you can get to US, basically. So that's why we do our UA tests in Canada. Then we kind of go to step 3, which is scale test, and that's with a fee. So it's not free, but it's with a fee. We put usually 5,000 to 10,000 on that, and the goal is to measure how much we can scale this game up. Can we scale this game up to 200,000 a month profitable spend? Can we do 500,000? Can we do $1 million a month profitable? So these tests are really important. 80% of the games that we test through this in step 3, 80% of the games do not pass step 3. And it's only after step 3 you know if a game passes that, you can scale it profitably, and you can really help the developer market their game. On the step 4, I mean, we see success. We see the game can scale into hundreds of thousands a month profitably. We usually try to, of course, come up with a nice plan where everybody's happy on a longer term as well, so we can make a longer term commitment. So that was the kind of funnels of how we test. So we publishing and UA, and now I just wanted to talk about a little bit about some of the parameters of success and how generally players in the mobile free-to-play market, in terms of publishers and investors, look at pre-launch games. So this is more like the soft evaluation. We also do this for UA games, by the way, because if you don't play the game that you're supposed to market, how are you supposed to market it, right? So you gotta also understand the weaknesses and strengths of that game before you can even market it. So there's basically 3, I would say, a few points that are critical. There's the core fun, of course, marketability, retention, monetization. Some of the important things, looking at evaluating especially pre-launch games. The CPI is very important because it is, what is the potential average estimate CPI? Because if you know that, that's when you can also target to have a specific lifetime value that you want to aim with your game. If your CPI is 1, then you need to have an LTV of over 1.5, ideally like 1.8. So you need to understand what is your average estimate CPI as early as possible. And something that, I don't see enough developers, they could do this. Actually, I can talk about, if somebody's interested in it, I can show you how to do this on your own, and it doesn't cost more than a couple $100, and you can do it even before you have a playable game. Just you have an idea, a couple mock-up screens, that you can already realize this. And I've seen so many awesome games do this just before they soft launch, and then they just see that, holy crap, it's gonna cost me over $4 to buy a user for this game, and I will never have an LTV over 4 because in this genre it's not possible. So something that I urge to do more often early on, and I don't see people doing that, and it's fairly easy. I hope somebody comes up with maybe a business idea for somebody. Do a really cool tool where developers can do that themselves. Holy crap, I just got an idea here. If you don't steal that idea, I trademark. Come talk to me before you do it. So also, when the important question also is when do you try to find a partner? So you have a great game, but at what stage to approach a potential partner? When do you need investment, and when you should be starting to sell your game out there for potential partners? I would say that, generally speaking, the closer the global launch, and this is by the way from the viewpoint of perspective from a publisher, where the publisher looks at, if you come with a publisher with just a concept, they immediately know that it's going to take a lot of money to make that happen. So it's going to be harder to pitch that. It's going to be harder to greenlight that with any partner. It's pretty simple, but a lot of people still don't seem to remember that. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. It's really important to understand that. I think ideally, the time that you want to go basically showing your game out there, looking for partners for publishing or marketing, is when your game is either in Google Early Access or early soft launch. That's the perfect time. I would say you should network as much as possible before that even, maybe tease your game a little bit. So generally speaking, there has been a few questions like recently from me where a lot of people are interested in doing games with brands, games with licenses, and this is a whole nother topic, but I'm not going to go too deep on that. But most of the calls that I get late at night from developers, like, hey, I have this idea, let's do like Marvel with this and that, and they're at the concept level. It's really hard to get a green light from a licensor and a publisher for a branded game, license-based game, that early on. So I would say you need to have soft launch data if you want to even think about like, hey, how would my game look like with this brand or this license? And usually you want to target a license only if you know that your CPI, you're going to a tough market, that you need to lower your CPI. So this is kind of a slightly different angle, but some of the deliverables that you should make sure, I mean, this is pretty obvious, probably to most of you guys, but I still wanted to highlight that it's, a few things like expectations, like if your game is in soft launch, obviously being able to have access to your game is important, roadmap and budget, KPIs, what is your CPI, people will ask that. Also, during global launch, instead of just looking at the retention and that, you need to know what is your return of ad spend, right? So that's something you should have in your back pocket when you talk to potential marketing partners, for example. And early on, it's really important to highlight the team, because if you have something in pre-launch, you're really selling the team. You're not really, okay, you're selling the idea of the game, the game itself, maybe the build, but the only confidence that any potential investor, partner, publisher, partner, marketer will have is really based on the team. So if your team is really killer, that can override a situation where somebody can still get excited even in a concept phase. So there's that as well. Some obvious do's and don'ts. Yeah, I've had some funny calls at like 3 a.m. from a developer. Woke me up and like, hey man, you haven't answered my email. I sent it yesterday. And it's like, no, like I need to sleep, please. But it happens. But just like give them a week. I think if you talk to investors, you talk to publishers, give them a 5-day turnover. Kind of that's what I would. And if they don't respond in 5 days, just send a text or ping, but don't overdo it. I think another thing is also that don't be shy on your KPIs. This is something that I just see all the time. People are like hiding the KPIs. Even if they're bad, even if they're not awesome, you need to show them and be proud of them and just have an answer how you're going to plan to address them, how you're going to improve them. But if you're trying to basically sit on them, it just looks like you're basically hiding something, and that's something that I wish more people would be more transparent about it. There's nothing to be ashamed of if your day one is like below 30. That can be addressed. You just need to tell that upfront to a potential partner and say like, hey, do you have ideas how to fix this? Most of the time they will. So, okay, going to the kind of meat of it. So I started doing the slide. It was like way larger, and I was like, Jesus, I need to condense this. But I tried to kind of summarize how do you evaluate potential for success in a little bit of an equation here of sorts. We have like a forecast tool algorithm that is basically this, but it crunches the numbers of historical data of existing games that we run UA, games that we published, looking at App Annie, looking at the top grossing charts. But basically, this is the estimation that we're doing. So we're actually adding a couple things here that is important to know, is that the key factor here is that obviously you want your CPI to be lower than your LTV. And if you're interested how to calculate LTV, I'm not going to go into that in this presentation, but you can see it from that link. I hope it still works. If not, let me know. But basically, you want to have your LTV over par your CPI. And then we look at the value of that, what is basically the difference between LTV and CPI. We look at the evaluation score, which is basically the score from the whole team evaluation I showed earlier. It was like this one. And this score is added to the algorithm that we crunch for the forecasting numbers. And then we put the amount of dollars needed to make that into reality, whether it's development funding, marketing funds, all the investment that is going into the game. And then what sort of a revenue share are we looking at? How much the developer is getting revenue share. So then we kind of print out the bottom line forecast in 3 different scales of UA spend. Actually, the forecast number 1 is 100,000 monthly profitable spend, 500,000, and then over $1 million. Because one of the important things is CPI is going to grow the higher your monthly spend is. So it's about, it grows about like 15 to 20% from 100,000 to 500,000, 500,000 to 1 million a month. It adds another 20% or so, roughly. So you need to take that into account, and then kind of print a simple yes or no. So if you look at that, you could get basically recoup your investment, and then the developer is going to get money, and the publisher is going to get money. So there's going to be profit for both parties, and then it makes sense. If not, then it doesn't make sense, right? That's when you shouldn't even do a deal. And most of the time, it's a no. Yeah, and usually we communicate this to potential partners as well, as transparent as possible. Yes. So just to give an example here, an example on live ops, because we were talking about, you know, LTV and how to increase the LTV. I think live ops, with live ops, you can actually increase it further. But you will only know that once your game is out there and you're actually doing live operations. So our ARPU increased by 35% in Linguinis by simply using our analytics setup to kind of, you know, predict a few, churn risk users and kind of react and engage them back into the game before they're about to churn. So, you know, live ops is a powerful way to further increase your LTV, but here I'm saying, like, okay, depends on the game, but I think if you do really good live ops, you can rely that maybe you can increase your LTV by 20% after global launch with really effective live ops. If you increase it by 35, that's really good, right? But you shouldn't count on increasing it more than, you know, 15 to 20% during live ops. So you can add that also into the equation here on the LTV, and that's what we do as well. We also add to the factor that normally you can lower your CPI by just doing better creative assets by about 30 to 35% lower, and it's also added to the calculation here. So all of those factors. Talking about, you know, publishing in general, also wanted to show you that when you're in soft launch, and and you're measuring your LTV, you're improving your game, you're doing quick iterations, update by update. You know, this was Siege, one of the games that we co-developed and published last year. We did a really good job together with the developer by sparring them from update to update, where we were trying to optimize their monetization and retention with, you know, best practices, and really sparring their designers and giving some suggestions. That ended up helping them quite a lot in terms of increasing their ARPDAU. And also we were able to lower their CPI by 34%, and that's just optimizing more sexy creatives. Like, we didn't change them radically. It was really adding more sex appeal to that. So then you know, this gets more, it seems more simpler to estimate games that are live globally in terms of their success. You know, it's mostly boils down to return of ad spend, and it seems like it's an easier thing to calculate, but it's really not. There's so many pieces there than just that one number. Like one of the critical things that we look at when we're doing when we look at, you know, can we scale your live game that you just published yourself? Can we help that scale up in terms of revenue and downloads where it is now? We look at getting to the point where your return of ad spend is 100%. So I wouldn't even launch globally a game if I don't know in soft launch that the return of ad spend is 100%. I wouldn't do that. That's just me, but I wouldn't do that. Unless, I mean, okay, if you have some license or brand that's going to bring organic reach, you can think you can launch it with a lower ROAS even. Important to also note is that internally, and this is us in terms of as a marketing investor and marketer, we look at our target internally for profitable UA is that we can get a 30-day payback is optimal. That's optimal. If it takes longer than that, the risk is higher. That's for any investing party, VC, us, anybody investing on marketing of that game. So anywhere between 30 days to 9 months, faster the better. And that's for our model that we're doing on the UA side. Talking about what can you do after you push your game out. You know, your game is there, you're still improving some things, but what can you improve with marketing, creatives? How can that help? And how much you can expect to be able to improve it? Obviously, I talked about lowering the CPI, but you can also, like some ads we've seen that you can actually, there's a direct correlation of doing new creative set to increasing your revenue in the game. We've seen this over and over again. Conversion as well, obviously, on the App Store assets, on ASO. Videos for us work the best. They just work every time much better than stills. I don't know if it's our awesome video artist guy. He's pretty awesome, but I don't think it is. I think it's there's a clear correlation between people getting more engaged from moving pictures than still image from especially social media channels like Facebook and the likes. And this was on a game called Almost a Hero. We saw that we did a video ad for those guys, and we were able to lower their CPI by 66%. And we've actually never seen that drastic decrease of CPI. So that was like a big surprise to us. And it was mainly a situation where we kind of showed the game from a couple new angles that the previous video ads haven't showed. There was some brain farts our creative team got, and they were like, well, this is a crazy idea, but let's give it a go. And it just worked. So in terms of especially video ad optimization, it really, the more you can try different types of video sets, the better ad sets. Of course, there's a lot of money that needs to go into video production, but I would, what we do oftentimes, we do a rough video ad, and then we run a test, like not on the real game, but like a fake test. And then we just get to see like the differentiation. We actually have a tool for that, which is basically A/B testing some videos. Obviously, the overhead is you need to create different videos, which takes time. Not as fast and easy as still images. Localized creatives also, I want to highlight, has a huge impact. Like for us, every time we actually do it right, we kind of get a reminder for ourselves that, oh crap, we need to do this for all our other games as well, because we saw massive improvements for this. Is actually on Siege, so we got a really good return rate by localizing. Especially Germans really like when you put the that was the best. We got best results there when you actually localized for Germans. It's funny. But it really pays out, actually. And if you find a way to do this, find a partner who can do this for you, that is usually well worth doing after your game is live globally. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I wanted to, before ending, just wanted to check if anybody has any questions or wants to go back on any particular slide, or happy to take any questions on the presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Miikka. It was really good. But I was wondering, also from our experience, the quality of the ad will determine the CPI, especially from the early on. It costs to make a very well produced video like that. So when we're talking the early stages of the testing, do you already invest like whatever couple days or a week of your best video artist for a game which is coming in to make sure that the creative is as good as gets, and then you run the $500 bill, or do you do it in some other way?
That's a really good question. Thanks for asking. I think with stills, we use our less experienced people just to do all kinds of different still creatives. But with video, we use our best guy to do different video. So you need to change your stills more often than you change your video ads. My feeling, at least. It's like church here. Hallelujah. Come on, guys, don't be shy. I know you guys had the party yesterday as well. I had, so I know how you feel.
So I'm just wondering as well, so you showed kind of static creatives and video. Do you guys also work with playable ads or any rich media formats? And if you do, what are kind of the results of that?
I wanted to put some really sexy results from playable ads, but our guys said that we don't have enough data yet. Don't show it. So we're still approximating, but we feel that playable ads make a huge impact on specific genres. We've seen a lot of good traction with idle games and strategy games where playable ads work really well. If you have more like a action RPG game or something like that, playable ads can have the impact can be more or less the same as the video ad, but you're just investing way more money in producing that. So I feel it really is genre dependent. Idle and strategy seems to work so far pretty well.
There's no sexy figures you can throw out?
I'll show you later. I have stuff, but you know.
Any more questions? So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Love you.